Welcome, everyone, to the March 19th, 2024 meeting of the Housing and Community Development Committee. I'm calling the meeting to order, and we'll ask for a roll call for make sure we've got a quorum.
Chair Bell.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Here.
Councilmember Reed. Hugo Rodriguez.
Here.
Joanne Zalomi.
Here.
Chloe Thurston.
Here.
Okay, great. Thanks. We have a quorum and are ready to do our business. So we have two sections of public comment this evening. First is the public comment on our HUD 2023 CAPER. That's our Consolidated Action Performance Evaluation Report. And I don't believe we have anybody signed up for that public comment.
We do not have anybody sign up for the CAPER comment. We did, however, receive one additional comment since we provided the committee with the comments in writing. We will provide this comment, full comment in writing to the committee after the meeting, as well as to City Council and to HUD. The summary of the comment was Mr. Jackson wanted to share feedback around the 60-unit apartment building on South Boulevard to be constructed on an underused parking lot, and wanted to share that the community areas got limited parking and that he had some concern related to removing some of the parking in that area. Mm-hmm. The full comments will be provided to the committee.
Okay. And as I understand it, there's going to be some resident-only parking created around the development so that residents in the area should still be able to have access to parking.
I am less familiar with this project, but I see Community Development Director Flax nodding.
Okay.
I think there are 20 public parking spaces that are in the lot that's being replaced that can be used by people in the neighborhood. And then, of course, the residents will have parking.
Right.
So, and that parking lot, when it was being used as a parking lot, generally had no more than that many
Residents. Right. Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, but it's a wonderful project, 60 units of affordable housing, so we can hardly wait. So with that, then I'm going to close the public comment period for the HUD 2023 CAPER and move on to our second period of public comment on any of the other items on our agenda, and I believe we have somebody signed up.
Yes, we have Jessica Trujillo, who is in the audience, if you want to come to the podium to provide your public comment. Yes.
I'm just going to read. I have followed the housing and community development meetings for over 6 months now with the Evanston RLTO on the agenda. The proposed changes to the RLTO are long overdue and significantly affect myself and my family. There seemed to be movement through the proposed changes. I was hopeful to see decisions and changes put into place at this point in time, or at least more movement forward. The halt in progress is distressing as it affects my housing stability significantly again in the upcoming months. I'm an Evanston renter, a single parent with 4 children, and I have lived and worked in Evanston for over 10 years now. I've been losing sleep again as my year-long lease comes closer to expiring each day. I still have boxes unpacked after moving in July of 2023. I'm uncertain as to whether I would be offered a lease renewal by my current landlord, even though I want to renew. After 7 years of the same residence, my last property management did not extend a lease renewal to me, despite my requests to do so and various offers to make higher monthly payments or payments up front. I was told they legally did not have to provide me with reason as to why they would not renew, and they had actually been generous by providing me 60 days notice instead of the legally required 30 days. Moving was traumatic, exhausting, and heart-wrenching. I listened to my children cry many days about their sadness in losing their home. We have since found peace with where we are at, but the fear of having to unwillingly move again has been haunting me. Since I had to experience the lack of security Evanston renters face with the standing RLTO in writing and in practice, I see just cause is yet again left off the meeting agenda for tonight's monthly meeting. I know there is at least Another month in waiting and another month closer to my lease's expiration before we Evanstonians will know what changes will go forth into the revised RLTO, and most particularly at this point in time, any further conversations and decision-making on the Just Cause ordinance. I want to know if my children and I will have our home come the end of July, or whether I should take the hours of lost sleep to be looking at potential properties coming onto the market. I'm fretting over how much money I must keep available to pay move-in fees, deposits, credit checks, first month's rent, last month's rent, moving costs, when my bank account is already drained from my current rent each month, while I am considering summer camps and sports for my children. The summer camps provide childcare for my children while I work over the summer months, and most payments are due prior to the summer beginning. I'm considering if I will need to miss potential work days to manage all the tasks of searching for a new home and all the daunting tasks around the process. I am desperately hoping to not have to carry the difficult emotions and burdens of this process, all the while navigating a full-time job and keeping up with the tasks of parenting my children alone. The prospect of all of this is overwhelming, yet it is the standing reality for not just me, but close to half of the Evanston's residents who rent. Please, we must bring the RLTO back to the table. We must take seriously the issues proposed to protect tenants in Evanston. We are not drug dealers, lowlifes, and criminals. We are not freeloaders or underproductive. We are people with families, friends, work, and commitments. We volunteer and participate in our community as residents. Please, let's bring the RLTO to the table and make standing decisions in favor of housing security, good business practice, and protections which make the people of Evanston secure in their sense of housing, so we can focus on everything else which contributes to our good health and to our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Thank you.
And I believe we are poised to set a date for our RLTO discussion soon.
Yes. After the email check around availability, the current schedule is to utilize the meeting on April 16th to be that meeting, for it to have it dedicated to the RLTO and just
Okay.
cause discussion. And Sarah Flex is going to lead this conversation.
Right, okay. So at our next regular HCDC meeting, we'll be talking about that. And we'll hear more from staff later. Okay, thank you. All right, so then our first, whoops,
I just want to mention there are two other comments that we're providing in writing in
Oh,
favor
okay.
of the RLTO. Those comments came after the cutoff to be included in the packet, so you will get it the same way as you got comments from last meeting in the next round.
great, okay, thank you. So now our first item of business is approval of the meeting minutes from our February 20th meeting. Could I have a motion? Council member, that's not council member, excuse me, it's Ugo, please.
It's me. Just wanted to, I don't know if this is the proper time for me to make a notation on the minutes from
Well,
our
let's
last meeting.
Could we have a motion first? A motion to?
Sure.
I move to approve the minutes of the February 20th meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's ready for discussion, so Ugo, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just like to point that we had public comment for about an hour, and then we had a pretty robust discussion within our committee about the issues with the Wesley buildings, and none of that is noted on the minutes. I thought that would be, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know the procedure for the city of Evanston, but any minutes that I know reflect what happens in the meeting. And also, to that note, I'd like to also say that about 2 hours when we're about to adjourn, I made a pretty strong objection to the special meeting that was held on January 29th regarding the real estate landlord-tenant ordinance in Evanston. So I'd just like to make those two notations, and I don't know if they're applicable to be an amendment to the minutes as they are.
Right.
I am happy to amend the minutes to mention your objection. When it comes to public comment, we follow similar procedure than the city council and other meetings do. So we have the names of the people providing public comment, and those are linking to the YouTube video.
Right.
So that people are able to get the full discussion.
But our
around the-
committee also had a pretty strong discussion about it.
Right.
And that is not reflected on the minutes, Marion, so that's what I'm noting here. So I asked if our meeting was started before I made the comments to the situation on the Wesley buildings, and we had a pretty strong
Yes, we did.
conversation about it.
So the meeting was definitely started. I can add a summary. Our minutes are usually high-level kind of action minutes, but I can add a summary of the conversation if you would prefer, as well as a summary around your objection.
Yeah, I think that
We-
those two are pretty high level.
We don't usually
Points.
transcribe like the exacts, but we can add summary if
gathered
that's
that,
that's a
but-
comment that you would like to add.
Right, and perhaps put a link to the section of the start of the committee's discussion about that.
Yeah,
maybe would-
that's, yeah,
Yep,
that's
okay,
good. Yeah.
great. Are there any other comments or concerns about the minutes? Okay, then,
Are we modifying the minutes to reflect those two things then?
Yes,
So
so
we're
are you-
approving the
are
minutes
you-
as modified?
Do you, Chair Yvonne?
would you, why don't you make a motion to have those,
To make
Item-
my
to
modification?
have those, yes.
Sure,
yes.
sure. So I don't know, the first motion needs to be
I think,
rescinded?
no, you're.
You can
Okay,
just-
I'm
you're just
not
amending.
sure about how the rules here
Yeah, no, you're-
work here, so,
Yeah.
okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended and adding the conversation about the Wesley buildings and also my strong opposition to the special meeting about the RLTO in January 29th.
Right, okay. So first, yes, Councilmember Harakaris.
Could we do that as a friendly amendment? I think there's,
Sure.
that way we wouldn't have to necessarily
Right,
vote.
right.
We could just, you say, present it as a friendly amendment to the minutes, adding those two things, and then we can.
I'm not sure of what friendly amendment means, and
well,
I would like it to be reflected
Right,
for history that we're having this issue with the Wesley residents
Right.
mainly.
right. So I think what,
Just say all those in favor?
sure,
We'll
I mean, we're
let's
just
just
trying to
make the-
wrap it all up in one vote, I think, is what a friendly amendment
All those in
would do.
favor for the amendment, and then
Yeah,
let's,
let's
then we
just
can-
do
let's
that,
just do
okay.
it the way we usually do
Right,
it
yeah,
at council.
okay, so, first, all in favor of Ugo's, I don't know, addition to the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, so now we have amended minutes, and all in favor of the amended minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. All right, thank you. So our first meaty item of business is a discussion and vote to recommend to the city council approval of $1 million for home ARP funding for non-congregate shelter and $150,000 for tenant-based rental assistance, and this is to go to Connections for the Homeless. Can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, Ugo, go ahead.
And I'm sorry to be sore thorn on the side here, but I really would like to add to today's agenda the issue with the residents and the Wesley buildings. It is something that has not been resolved, at least the city hasn't come up with a resolution to that situation, and those residents are not receiving the treatment that our city should be giving to residents in our city, especially when they're elderly, when they're in need of financial assistance, and they're African American, and they have been, some of them have been all life residents of the Fifth Ward, and they're being displaced. And I think that the city should come up with a plan that it's discussed, and, you know, what I've been told
Chair,
is
point
not
of
a plan.
information is
If I-
that, is, it- no, point of information Is this what we're discussing on this particular agenda item?
No,
Okay.
well, I think what Ugo is asking for us to have at least an update from staff about this, and we can.
We shouldn't have moved this agenda item in. I'm just saying it should have, and we can have it, but we literally just moved an agenda item that has
We
nothing to
did,
do
right,
about this.
yeah, so
And now we're allowing discussion on
Right,
a
right, so-
different
so
matter.
technically-
Happy to talk about it,
right,
and it's gonna be,
right.
I
so-
am not gonna keep order on this. I'm just gonna be very clear right now.
Mm-hmm.
The second you say something, Ugo, that is misinformation, I'm going to object, in the way that a prosecutor or an attorney would.
Sure, and you
And
should
you've
tell me
already
what
said
is
something that's not true.
misinformation. What is it?
And so, every time somebody spreads misinformation about
Well,
this,
tell me what the
it
misinformation is.
puts the residents at risk.
Bobby, tell me what's
I'm
the
going to,
misinformation.
I'm going to let you, I'm going to first allow the
Right.
chair to determine
Sure.
how she wants to handle this. But I'm not standing by with this anymore and allowing people to use this as political football. I'm going to strongly object. And I will disrupt this meeting every time I hear misinformation spread, because every time it's spread, it makes it harder for the city to work with these residents, and it puts them at greater risk. I am no longer going to allow it, and I promise you that.
Okay,
So,
so
Chair,
let
to you,
me-
I
let me
will allow
clar-
you to
Yeah, let me,
determine how you
let
want to
me
handle this.
clarify how we're going to proceed for this evening. So first of all, committee members, if you have an item that you'd like to add to the agenda, it would be helpful to the chair if you would let me know ahead of time, so I would not have moved us right into the first item of business. And so I
Chair
think-
Revelle?
Mm-hmm.
I asked for a special meeting to talk about this topic. I was ignored. Second email I sent to the entire committee was to ask for this item to be added to the agenda, and I was ignored. So I told Director Flax that I was going to bring it up today, and that's what I'm doing. Now, Bobby is accusing me of misinformation. I asked him 3 times, what is the misinformation he's speaking about? Let me finish, please. So
I
if
literally
you-
said, if you spread misinformation, I will strongly object. I did not
You
say
said
have.
that I am.
I did not say that. I said if you spread misinformation, or anybody does during this meeting about the Wesley
You're
properties, I will
attacking
strongly object.
preemptively.
You could, we're literally on recording, so you can play it back when you get home, and you will see that I said if anybody spreads any misinformation about this issue on this dais or at any point moving forward, I'm going to strongly object
Right.
and
But
correct the record.
So
That's what I
Councilmember
said.
Burns, so we're not into the substance of anything yet. We're just procedurally trying to figure out when we're going to have the discussion.
If he mentions me, I'm jumping. I'm not playing around with this anymore. So again,
okay, so
I will
let's-
follow
Right.
whatever your direction is,
Right,
Chair.
okay.
Thank you.
So we will discuss the issue of the Wesley residents and those apartment buildings under staff updates. Staff is prepared to talk about that,
Okay.
and we
thank
can
you.
we can explore the issues at that point. So, ignoring everything that just happened for the last 5 minutes, did we actually get a motion on the table for a discussion of the funding for Connections for the Homeless? This is our $1 million of home ARP funding for a non-congregant shelter and $150,000 for tenant-based rental assistance.
So moved.
And can I have a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, so staff, is there a presentation?
There is not a presentation, but there's a update around the memo, and then we'll have the team at Connection for the Homeless available for questions.
Okay.
So I just want to give you kind of a summary of why we're discussing this. In 2021, the city of Evanston was allocated Home ARP funds, Home American Rescue Plan funds, to be able to carry out very specific activities. In 2022, the City Council and HUD approved an allocation plan for that funding, specific funding, Home ARP, to be divided with $1 million for a non-congregate shelter project and $150,000 to go for tenant-based rental assistance associated with that project. Home ARP funds has very specific requirement that's separate. It's a completely separate grant, but it follows some of the similar requirement around home funding that we use as an example for our regular TBRA. We opened an application for nonprofits and other organizations that would potentially be interested and eligible to apply. mid-February and closed the application. We received one applicant, which is Connection for the Homeless. The application was open for organization to apply for just the shelter, just TBRA, or both. Connection for the Homeless decided to apply for both items. They have recently acquired a non-congregate shelter and are owners of a property in Evanston, as you may already be aware. They're requesting $1 million of funding for critical repairs to that shelter. That includes $775,000 for repairs, $225,000 in construction contingency and architectural soft cost. They also have applied to a couple other sources of funding that are currently tentative and not fully completed for the remaining cost of some of those repairs. As far as tenant-based rental assistance, that's $150,000 that would go specifically to be able to assist households that are looking to exit the shelter and go into housing, permanent housing. And being that it's $150,000, the estimate so far is it would help 3 to 4 households approximately for up to 24 months. This is the general overview of the project. Connection for the Homeless has experience with handling federal funding, which is a major requirement as far as being able to allocate funding, specifically this grant, which is not only federal funding but also newer, which can sometimes be a little bit challenging for organization to keep up with requirements. And they currently have, obviously, the shelter already in place as well as existing tenant-based rental assistance program and the capacity to disperse funds and work on the reimbursement process, which is also something that not every local organization is able to do financially. We have Betty Bach, that is the executive director of Connection for the Homeless, that is here, as well as other members of her team for the committee to ask any question they are looking to ask.
Great, thank you. Excuse me. So, committee. Excuse me. So, committee members, any questions, or we could invite Betty to say a few words, or? Yeah, about, yeah, right, just, we know that you've recently finalized the purchase of Margarita Inn, and so therefore you're ready to make some much-needed major improvements, repairs. If you'd like to just talk briefly about those.
Sure, that's correct. Good evening, everyone. I'm Betty Bogg. I'm the CEO at Connections for the Homeless. As Councilmember Ravel, Chair Ravel mentioned, we have completed our acquisition of the Margarita Inn. We closed on November 30th with funding from Cook County ARPA money, ARPA SLIFRIF money, in the form of a 30-year forgivable, no payment, zero interest loan. So we are operating there and have been. It's just about our 4th anniversary of our original hotel shelter program, which began at the Margarita Inn. So we're very familiar with the building. After 4 years of operations, we know kind of what we have to tackle. And there are many things. It's a hotel built in 1927, so as you might imagine, there are massive issues for accessibility for people with mobility issues. There's safety issues, there's system building control issues, and we anticipate that there will be extensive rehabilitation, especially around the issues of access and mobility. The $1 million that the city is proposing to allocate to us is not sufficient to cover the extent of those renovations, but there are renovations that we need to make immediately. We need to put a new roof on the building. We have an underground storage tank in the back. There's tuck pointing that is essential for us to complete in order to ensure the integrity of the building, especially as we go into another winter. There's all kinds of security kind of upgrades that we need to make. We'll have I apologize for not having a picture tonight. I was like, get a picture of that front door with the telephone that doesn't work, and the lockbox that doesn't work, and the other thing that doesn't work, so there's all kinds of sort of urgent matters that we need to attend to, and this allocation will help us make sure that building is there for the community and is safe to operate.
Great, thank you. So, committee ready to vote?
I just wonder, where are you getting some of the other funding for renovations?
So there's a couple of different sources. So ARPA's rolling out in these different sort of avenues. Cook County still has more ARPA money to allocate. The state has a $38 million pot of money that's coming through the Illinois Housing Development Authority. They are set to release that RFP in August of 2024. We anticipate those funding decisions will be made probably in the spring of 25, so maybe a year from now. There's some money from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO, at the state of Illinois. So there's all these different, they're not like super well integrated, so we kind of have to, it's not a nice, neat capital stack quite yet. So we are in discussion with all those funders.
Great. Okay. Well, I think it's great to be able to assist Margarita in and getting fixed up more, so that's really great.
We're very grateful.
Yeah. So should we have a roll call on this?
Chair Revelle,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Joanne Zalomi, Chloe Thurston.
Aye.
Great, thank you, everybody. The motion passes, and we'll go on to City Council. Next is approval of the 2023 Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, and this is, we need a motion to accept and place this on file.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so, Marion, we have comments from you, or?
Sure, yes. So as you are all aware, this is our annual evaluation performance report that essentially states what was performed in 2023 and provides a outline of the activities that were carried with the funds that HUD is providing to us. That includes CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, ESG, and Home, as well as other efforts that we carry. We expended, during 2023, we received $2,131,152 from HUD, and we expended $2,427,765. The reason for that difference is because we have rollover funding and program income that we are trying to expend, as there was some delay during the COVID time, and we're trying to push through that. The bulk of that is usually expended through CDBG. As you may have noticed, we spent a little bit less than usual in home funds, $76,000 approximately. We're having a little bit of challenges with some of the availability of units and high rents in Evanston. That makes it challenging to find units for people that are getting home T-Breton and base rental assistance, because there's caps as far as how much rent is allowed with those programs. And then usually the home funding fluctuates because we have allocation for both tenant-based rental assistance as well as bricks and sticks project. So we usually combine a few years of funding in one project since it's such a small amount. So that explains why we expended a little less than usual. Last year we had bricks and sticks projects, so that makes the difference. We also expended an additional approximately $295,000 of CDBG CV funds, which, if you remember, we got through the CARES Act in 2020. As you may remember, in December, you approved the remaining of those funds to be used for a park upgrade project, so that 2024 to 2025 should see the last of that funding being expended. I'm open to any questions from the committee. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Marion. So, committee, any questions or comments for staff? Okay, then I think we're ready for a vote to accept and place this on file.
Chair Revelle,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Joanne Zalomi, Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Great, thank you very much. And now, on to something pretty new for us, I think, to talk about planning and program updates to implement the city council's affordable housing goals. And so this is a presentation and just an item for our discussion. So.
And this is a presentation that Uri from our team is going to
Okay.
provide to the committee.
Great, okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Uri Pachter, Senior Housing Planner. There are many exciting plans and policy updates on the horizon for 2024 relating to affordable housing. And I just wanted to tee up some of these things so that when they start coming on the agenda for HCDC in the future, it's not surprising. And there is a lot of overlap. So it potentially could be confusing moving forward. Which plan are we talking about? What's the time horizon? What are the limitations? And just want to start breaking down the differences so that when we do approach those items later in the year, we'll have a full agenda and it'll be helpful to keep track of everything. So I'm just going to bring up the first of 3 of 7 city council goals that were approved in December around affordable housing. In November, I presented these to the committee. There were actually 6 at the time. The committee discussed it, approved it as recommended to City Council, and recommended to add a 7th one, which in December, City Council approved all 7. So the goals, I'm not going to go over each goal in detail, but we'll come back to them as we talk about the other plans and policies because they relate. But just in general, they're related to units that are in the pipeline, dealing with naturally occurring affordable housing, looking at the city's comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance, looking at vacant and underutilized properties, updating the inclusionary housing ordinance, completing a strategic housing plan, and the last one, the 7th one, looking at new sources of rental assistance funding. That's the one that was suggested in particular by this committee that was added and approved. So these are the 5 topics that I want to quickly mention. They each will take multiple sessions to go over, but just, again, to tee it up. So they include Envision Evanston 2045, the Strategic Housing Plan, the upcoming 2025-2029 HUD 5-year Consolidated Plan. That's a mouthful. We're going to try our best to call that the HUD plan moving forward to not have things too confusing. But sometimes it'll probably be called the CON plan or the consolidated plan. Apologies if it is confusing. We're going to do our best to make it less confusing. The inclusionary housing program update and affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is also a mouthful. Sometimes that's abbreviated AFFH. So again, the elements that I'm going to focus on tonight are the key differences, the alignment with City Council goals, and the general time horizon as we start getting into more detail later in the year. So the first one is Envision Evanston 2045. This is the one of the 5 that's currently starting to take place. We're in phase 1 of this process. This process is working to both develop and approve a new comprehensive plan, which really focuses on developing a shared vision for the city of Evanston, and a zoning code, which is really a major tool among many, but will be passed hopefully simultaneously to update the ways that property can be used and what can be built where. Those things are not specifically only related to housing, but clearly have a major impact on housing. So Envision Evanston 2045 is looking, as you can tell by the year, a 20-year time horizon, and touches on vast array of topics, housing being one of them. You can go to envisionevanston2045.com for more information. Just a quick plug, I left some postcards and some flyers outside. There's a survey going on right now that lasts until April 5th, and there are 6 meetings coming up. The 6 meetings, 5 in person, 1 online, Spanish interpretation, free childcare, snacks and beverages, not at Civic Center, but out in the community. We're really trying our best to hear as many voices as possible. So in the next 3 weeks, if you can tap your networks to get involved in this, that would be fantastic. This is the one that is not specifically under the purview of HCDC, but we're trying not to keep it siloed, and we'll bring it to HCDC a couple times later on to specifically look at the housing-related material. The Land Use Commission is the main body that's going to be recommending that to City Council later this fall. So that's Envision Evanston 2045, 20-year time horizon, housing, and many other topics. So as we start sort of opening up the Russian dolls into the nesting, what's inside, we get to the strategic housing plan. So now we're talking about housing only. Obviously, housing interacts with lots of other things, but this isn't about all the other topics. It's specifically about housing. We're talking about a 10-year time horizon, and we're talking about all types of housing. So single-family, multifamily, market rate affordable, senior, student, for sale, rental. If I didn't list it, we're also talking about that as well. And this is something that's specifically, as you can see in terms of the goals, one of the 7 goals is to complete a strategic housing plan in 2024. This is not something that we've done recently, and it really allows us to align strategically and measure impact, pool our resources, collaborate, and move the needle in a more significant way around housing in Evanston. So that's the strategic housing plan in a nutshell. Being more specific and even more focused when it comes to topic and timeline is the consolidated plan. This is something we do every 5 years. It's federally mandated. The various types of funding that we receive from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, including their 3 major ones that I've listed below. We receive those every year, and we follow our 5-year plan. So this year, in 2024, is our final year of the previous 5-year plan, and this is our opportunity to assess need and identify gaps and look at priorities specifically for the funding that comes from the federal government here. So it's more limited than the strategic housing plan. Money, for example, that we receive from inclusionary housing ordinance and our affordable housing fund doesn't have the same level of restrictions that this money does. So this is also a 5-year plan, and it addresses a couple of the goals mentioned below as well. So those are the major planning initiatives that are on the radar. The last 2, strategic housing plan and the consolidated plan, you'll see when we get to the calendar, are specifically under this committee's purview, and we'll discuss it multiple times and look for a recommendation to move to City Council. The next one is the inclusionary housing program update. One of the goals specifically of City Council, as approved in December, is to amend the inclusionary housing ordinance to increase the inclusionary requirement. While we're doing that, we're also going to be looking to better align with Illinois state property tax incentives to increase incentives that we don't necessarily have to provide ourselves, but can be received through other funding sources. And also just looking to calibrate and streamline the program so it's easier, it's much more clear for the community, for developers, for staff, the whole nature of the program. This is one where the time horizon's a little bit different. We're going to update it. It will operate in perpetuity until there's another update and go from there. The main difference of a policy versus a plan. And again, this is even more specific because there's certain covered developments that are eligible, that are covered developments, and others that are not. So we're talking about a very specific subset of housing in Evanston. The final one I'll mention more briefly is affirmatively furthering fair housing. This is a federal initiative. Locally, it's being led by Cook County. There are some new proposed policies and requirements in order to proactively work towards furthering fair housing. I put some information on this slide. It's likely to look like having an equity plan that Cook County works on every 5 years that mimics the timing of our consolidated plan, and we would include pieces of each in concert with each other. We're waiting to hear back from the federal government on exactly what those requirements are. It's still in draft stage and what the timing is. So it may or may not end up being something that we end up working on in the near term. It's definitely the elements are things that are on our radar and we're going to be talking about in the strategic housing plan and other places, but the specific requirements and partnerships here, unclear what the timing is. We'll keep everybody posted when we hear more. We've been checking with HUD on a regular basis and have yet to hear an update. So here's a draft meeting calendar so that everyone can get a general sense of how this looks. There may be elements that change, things will come up, but we're going to do our best to generally stay to this time frame. And I'll go over each of them just very briefly. So as I mentioned, Envision Evanston 2045 is under the purview of the Land Use Commission. Environment Board and Preservation Commission also have regulatory ties to that process, but we don't want to leave this committee out. So there's a couple points where we're looking to have material from the drafting of the plan brought to the committee and discussed. The next three, as you can see, there's three main stages: the introduction, the draft, and the recommendation to City Council. We've intentionally set it up so that the introductions are at least 2 months and in sometimes as much as 5 months in advance of the draft, so that there's plenty of time to have big picture conversation where the general direction could be heading before we dive into actually here's the material in the draft, make tweaks, and make a recommendation at the month after. So as I mentioned previously, it could be easy to get confused between which thing we're talking about, and we're going to try to do our best to give advance notice like this to tee those things up and stay on track so that we can most of these are plans, and so plans are only as impactful as the action that comes out of them. So we don't want to spend too much time planning. We want to do the action parts. So some of these are more aggressive timelines, and we appreciate in advance our ability to sort of be constructive and give as much feedback as possible early in those intro periods so that when we get to the draft stage, nothing is a surprise. That's the main general thrust. As I mentioned, the affirmatively furthering fair housing I didn't include since the timeline is just completely up in the air. I'll pause here for any questions.
All right, committee. Thoughts or questions? Yes, Ugo.
Thank you. On your goal number 2, you mentioned the naturally occurring affordable housing. And could you elaborate a little bit more? What is a naturally occurring affordable housing? How does that happen?
Sure. So mainly the difference is between a unit or a property that's receiving some type of funding from some source, be it any type of government agency, usually a public funds, to make that rental property or for sale property affordable to the individual or the household. If it's naturally occurring, it's affordable without that. So the housing provider is charging something, an amount, if it's a rental, that is 30% or less of the household's income on its own.
So it's something like it's out of your plan. It doesn't have anything to do with the city plan. It just happens that I rent a house to somebody that has a voucher of sorts or any subsidy coming with that tenancy.
I would say yes and no. There's clearly a difference between the city having a program that offers funding that can reduce the cost of rent or homeownership. But as in the strategic housing plan, where the city is interested in assessing and understanding the markets in general. And so if let's say the city passes in the new zoning update, doesn't pass equitable zoning laws that restricts housing significantly, naturally occurring affordable housing will inevitably be reduced. So we have an impact on it. It's just more from a regulatory standpoint than a funding standpoint. Is there anything in particular you want me to clarify?
So what I'm trying to connect with here is how is that part of your plan when it's, unless it's the city that's offering that subsidy? Is that what we're talking about? Properties that have subsidy from the city of Evanston?
So in this circumstance here, the property isn't receiving any subsidy initially. And then, let's say it's a homeowner is looking for assistance from the city to keep the home affordable, to stay in the home. And so, and rehab it, and we have programs that do that, if that makes sense. But it's not a nonprofit that's running 50 units that are all affordable because of low-income housing tax credits. It's a different setup. Yeah.
Just want to clarify, it's the simple way, and you said this already, I just want to emphasize, it's not subsidized. Naturally occurring affordable housing is not subsidized by any city, by any program. The landlord has figured out a way to produce affordable rents without subsidy. And, yeah, please.
Sorry, but isn't aren't the funds to rehab the subsidy of sorts, or?
On rehab, and that's what I was going to go to, is that the way to Ugo's point, the way we do get in, or anybody can get involved is like for kind of single contributions, but it's not a long-term subsidy, on the unit that makes it affordable in perpetuity. But one-time contributions, which is the case with rehab programs, is the way the city can participate in helping landlords who are providing the units affordably.
Can I ask just a follow-up? So say the rehab increases the value of the property, and are there sort of checks in place so that the property would remain affordable?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
And of worms,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
we probably could debate that for a while, but I personally believe that these minor kind of maintenance repairs are not things that are going to drastically increase the value of a home. We're trying to maintain the value of the home by making sure that they can maintain it, with the mechanicals and some of the basic things that are necessary.
we also don't do that much rental. So up until recently, the bulk of the rehab projects were ownership. And it was a tool to be able to help residents, low-income, moderate-income residents, stay in the community because their homes were in disrepair. We do some rental, and those rentals have requirements around affordability. It's also important to note that those are in full grants. They're 0% interest deferred loans.
So the requirements I'm sorry, Chloe, you want to finish up? Go ahead. Yeah. The affordability is a requirement for that loan to remain under the terms of the grant or
Yeah.
whatever for a period of time?
Yeah.
And, okay, so there is a period, there's a term to it.
Oh, yeah, there's a
Okay.
term of affordability. There's a term of affordability that's associated with the amount of funding that is being received.
Okay, thank you.
And I just quickly want to say, but that's different than value, to your point, committee member Chloe. Sorry about that. So I just want to make sure we're not crossing, because what I thought you said was, is it going to increase the value? And then another question is, are they allowed, is the landlord allowed to increase the rents? And to me, those are two different points. So I just want to be clear that I was responding to. Yeah, I was responding to whether or not it would increase the value. I don't believe it would. Whether or not they would increase the rents, I think we have protections in place, which was just described. But I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
And not to add extra confusion, but Marion's talking about a particular program that we run, and this goal is more general than that. So theoretically, the way we run the program could change and still meet this goal. This is just a more general benchmark, and we have a particular way we've been doing that of late.
Uri, I have another question, if I may.
Sure.
In terms of the affirming, furthering affirmatively furthering fair housing. There you go. Thank you. You have there the topics that we are trying to affirm are segregation, fair housing choice, disparities in housing-related opportunities, and inclusive communities free from discrimination, et cetera. So it's that kind of topic that will be furthering, making it better for a community. Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
So Chloe, did you have any more? No. Okay. In terms of the strategic housing plan, so do we have one from a while ago that, I think you sort of mentioned that maybe we do one every 10 years or so, but.
Every 5 years.
So my proposal was that we'd start doing them every 10 years.
Oh, I see.
We'll call it the HUD plan. We do that every 5 years. It's federally mandated. If we don't do it, we don't get our entitlement money from HUD. The comprehensive plan, it's good practice to do at least every 20 years. We're already 25 years past, and our zoning code is 31 years. So we're behind on those. The idea was to slot this in between so that you sort of have your strategic housing plan can plan for two HUD plans can help address that, and two strategic housing plans can fit in there. But it is definitely more forward-looking than backwards looking in terms of how we've done it.
Okay, so I was just wondering whether we had done one in the past. So this is going to be a new endeavor for us. Okay, here we go.
The last housing plan was done in 2009. And that was just heading into the mortgage crash, in that period. And then we started working on the next one in 2018, and it got derailed by COVID. So we're going to not have that happen this time. We're going to actually get it done. We've just had bad luck with our timing of our housing plans.
Yeah, it's just when we were starting in 2019, we had the word affordable in there, strategic affordable housing plan. So this is more general, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, I would say it is slightly more general. Clearly, the role of the city is more so in furthering affordable housing, as that's a city council goal. But the plan isn't going to only look at affordable housing to better understand the general market. We think that'll be helpful for all renters and homeowners, and also for us to do a better job in the affordable housing piece as well.
And so do we envision any community engagement as part of that effort?
Yes, it will be a fairly short internal process to move forward, because our understanding is there's been a lot of processes where we've heard loud and clear from people that this is so important. And so we don't want to, we owe the community here's what we've heard, here are some best practices, let's hit the ground running. We're also going to focus on folks who are most impacted in organizations, at least on the affordable side. Again, there's the other pieces as well in terms of financial experts and developers to understand the intersection, but there'll definitely be a community engagement component of it.
Great, thank you.
Not working.
Yes.
So how can that go forward when it's going to take a couple of years to get the new zoning ordinance done?
Sure. So the current timeline for the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan is the first quarter of 2025. So that's actually only a year from now. And they're related, but they're not completely intertwined. The strategic housing plan, we're really looking at it as more of an action plan. And so understanding a lot of it will be what are the next steps. And so some of it might be actually in the zoning update, and a lot of it will be beyond that. So, but that is something to keep in mind as we're juggling all these different projects at the same time. And that's, as staff, we can do our best to try to hear everything you're saying and find all the different ways to plug that in and not make you always responsible for figuring that out.
Well, it's all a very exciting work plan. Yes, Councilmember Burns.
With Envision Evanston, we're working with consultants on that, correct? Have they been at the meetings? Because it feels, and I haven't been to all the meetings, but it feels to me like city staff is driving this, which may be a good thing and calculated and intentional, but they're also participating in that as well, I hope. Okay.
Yeah, so we have the 6 community meetings that are coming up are all consultant-led with staff as well, but the consultants are definitely driving those. There's some meetings, if council members were interested in having an agenda item on Envision Evanston, staff is attending those. And then there's organizational meetings and meetings in a box, and those are community-led, staff-led, and led by the consultants, just depending on availability and sort of like work day versus evenings and weekends. The consultant team has provided updates to, I believe, the Land Use Commission, and I think they were on hand at the first city council meeting. My understanding was the council requested that staff be the lead in terms of the presentation, but they've been available and on hand for questions.
That's good. I just, you know, and this is something, Director Flags, I'm sure you're working on already. Don't want to add too much workload to our staff. I know y'all are busy enough, and we pay good money for the consultants, so I want to make sure they were also participating in those meetings. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So the first one that we're going to hear back about was what, the strategic housing, which one is coming up first?
So the April schedule doesn't have any of these four
Okay,
on it, but
right.
starting in May, we should have an introduction of the inclusionary housing program update.
Okay.
And then in June, both the strategic housing plan and the HUD plan.
Got it, right. Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're ready for staff updates. We have 2 that were in our packet, and then we have our third item that we have added this evening. I'm happy to take them in any order. Shall we, let's go ahead and do the SEPA report and the MTO report, and then we'll be ready for the discussion of Wesley Avenue.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a 2023 report around SEPA and MTO. We usually ask the representative from SEPA and MTO to join in July at our July meeting. They come twice a year, as well as when we do contract agreement. If you have any specific question related to what I'm going to talk about, I am more than happy to take those questions, get that to them, and then bring them back to the committee by email or at the next meeting or any other future meeting. I'm providing an update here on the IHO Inclusionary Housing Ordinance waitlist that our community partner for affordable housing manages for us. We have seen an increase in the wait list. There's some household that dropped, though, during the annual update, which is still in process of being updated. So as of right now, the total number of household that is currently on the wait list is around 886. with 316 of those households being classified as local preference, meaning they're either Evanston resident or work in the Evanston area. One thing I wanted to mention is we've seen a large increase on the share of local preference household on the wait list. So that's an interesting update. I also want to mention that we have highlights in this report as far as the income level around the wait list. The vast majority of households that would be eligible for an inclusionary housing unit would usually have income between 51% to about 100% AMI, and that represents currently 25% of the total list. We've seen the most increase since the last update in the 0 to 50% income, area median income, and those type of income usually require some type of subsidy. They are still on the wait list because some things might change in their income level. They might get a voucher at some point. We always keep them on the wait list, but I just want to mention that. We are definitely continuing effort around outreach. SEPA is doing outreach within the community, flyers, working with the schools. They usually have live events at the Robert Crown Library. And they also will have additional update for the July meeting because they started advertising in different ways to make the units more accessible. And we're continuing partnership around this to make sure that we keep building the wait list so that when a unit becomes available, people are ready to sign up. So that is the update for the units. We got, SEPA was able to, they are just starting lease up of the building at 718 Main, which is the Vogue Tapestry Station building that you may have seen in the community. They recently finished leasing the building at 100 Chicago, which was Chicago and Howard building, that's that newer building. And obviously they're continuing the work around any kind of turnover or lease up for some of our units. Although usually turnover is very low on affordable inclusionary housing units.
Are all of those affordable units on the Howard building? Howard and Chicago?
Oh, no, they're not all. This is the 100 Chicago building is a private, a market rate building. So all the units that are managed by SEPA for lease up are part of the market rate buildings that are required to provide affordable units through the inclusionary housing ordinance. So in the 100 Chicago building, there was 5 units. At 718 Main, there was 12 units. So depending on the size of the building and their development, there's different number of units. But that's a requirement in Evanston for new construction.
10%, right.
And that is what you will be discussing with Ori at the May meeting,
Okay.
updating that
So
ordinance.
all those units are already rented out?
The 100 Chicago one, yes, they got leased up. The 718 are in the process of being leased up right now. So when new units become available, SEPA will go through the wait list and start contacting people to let them know that their units available. We always welcome any help in advertising this program. There's a variety of unit at a variety of income. The inclusionary housing ordinance historically at different income levels. So we have units at 80% AMI. With bulk of the units are at 60% AMI. There's very few or 1 or 2 around 50%, but it's, any help in advertising this program is more than welcome.
So there is no waiting list for those apartments? They're up for grabs?
No, there is a wait list that SEPA manages. It's a centralized wait list. So to be able to lease up an apartment that's part of the inclusionary housing ordinance, you have to be on the wait list. You submit a pre-application, and then when a unit becomes available, SEPA goes through the wait list and start contacting people that may be eligible based on their submitted income and household size and the unit size that's available, and then go through that list to lease the unit. At 718, there are studios, 1 bedroom, and for the majority, and then 1 2-bedroom. At 100 Chicago, there were 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms. The unit at 100 Chicago were a little bit larger. 718 Main is designed as a smaller, kind of smaller units with shared space, common spaces. So they tend to be a little bit smaller.
And the developer for these buildings that are subject to the IHO, I think, is really grateful to have SEPA helping find eligible tenants for those units, because, you know, then they don't have to advertise and screen and do all those things. SEPA takes care of all that for the developer.
Right. Before anybody's sent to see the unit, the usual process is SEPA goes through the wait list with all the pre-application, certifies in order based on the system, and certifies all their income, so that by the time they reach the property manager knows they're already qualified for the program and eligible. So that makes it a lot easier for them.
So what you're asking us to promote is SEPA or
Do you want to-
the units? Oh, sorry about that. So are you asking us to promote SEPA, the processing of these potential tenants, or the units themselves?
I'm asking if you're able to help promote the program itself and the existence of the wait list and the pre-application process for anybody that is asking you a question around affordable housing in Evanston that could potentially be eligible. We always welcome the help. Advertising the unit doesn't really necessarily make sense because there's usually a wait list. There are some cases where people are on the wait list, and based on who's available, interested, and the preference, it might be pretty quick. But generally speaking, yes, promoting the program and how to sign up for the wait list is always welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Oh, Sarah.
It actually helps our residents who are looking for affordable housing, because if we didn't have a centralized wait list, they would have to find out every building that had any of these units and try to figure out how to apply to them. So it not only helps the property managers, it helps the potential tenants that we're trying to get into our units, because it's a real challenge to find where there are affordable units and then apply for them.
Yeah, right. No, it's a great program. Yeah. Okay, any other questions about the SEPA report? Then, Mary, you want MTO?
Sure. So this is a update on the 2023 year for MTO, for the tenant landlord hotline services. So in 2023, they got 305 calls. We updated the report based on feedback that the committee provided last July. There's some additional updates that are in the works. So we changed the setup so that at the top you can see the number of actual calls, and then the bottom below that there's the category of issues. One of the confusion last time was the fact that sometimes people go with multiple issues. So you can see there's 305 calls for 2023. 71 calls came through 311. 29 came through our text feature that was launched pretty much September or October. So we're seeing there's a good amount of interest in comparison to 311, and we expect there's going to be an increased number for 2024 as they work this out. They provided some context around the data around those text contacts so that in future report we'll be able to include them within the report. We're still working on that. They are, so we also started a report around the 311 call, which we can track so that we can see the average number of business day that MTO is taking to respond from the time that the request is open in the system to the time that they're making the first contact. We are relying on MTO providing updates in the system. And so far for 2023, we are seeing that on average, they were taking 1.4 business days to respond. We are going to continue to review that with them, and we have monthly meeting with them so that they're aware of where their numbers are sitting. Obviously, the only capability we have is through the 311 calls. It doesn't include all the calls. Additionally, we also have, the committee had requested the potential implementation of a survey. They have started on the survey. They did send the first survey. We're working with them to try to see how we're going to integrate that within the reporting and what kind of questions they are using. I got a draft number around how they contacted the MTO hotline. Did they receive the information they were looking for? Are they likely to recommend MTO to someone else they know that are experiencing landlord or tenant issues? So far, that's their kind of 3 questions they're hoping to put through, and we're hoping that by the July meeting, we will have an update that includes numbers on this survey so that the committee can have full visual on this. We're finding that the key topics aren't changing very much as part of trend. Lease is still number 1 as far as the issues people are calling about, maintenance being number 2, and early termination being number 3. MTO has also done some work around community organizing in the community and has done some work in partnership with Northwestern. They participated in multiple events as well, including a housing fair. And then they've also provided, the committee had requested to hear the kind of work that they do. So they've provided a couple stories as well to explain how they help tenants in specific cases.
Great, thank you. Committee, Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, just want to say thank you for working on the survey. As probably everybody up here knows, that's something I brought up at a few meetings, and so I really appreciate that. I think it's going to help us as we try to, not again necessarily on determining whether or not we renew these partnerships, but more so just giving us some insight on what people are experiencing. So thank you for that. And then, is there a way that MTO can report out similar to how like 311 does, where we can know like how many are active, how many are closed, how many are, and just a thought, I don't want to, because I know that's gonna, it'll come down to how their system, whatever system they're using, kind of downloads information but it would be helpful. I think we've talked a little bit about that before, but we never, I don't think anybody ever provided an example of how we could do it, and that was just something that came to mind as something we may want to reference.
So when you talk about active versus closed, are you looking to see how many requests are kind of like simple, like I need help with the lease, this was done, we helped, we closed it, and this was
like
under 2 weeks versus...
we have like a list, we know exactly like what the complaints are. Who called is not important. The address I don't think is particularly important, but like what was the nature of the call, which ones are active, which ones are closed, and there's probably some other designations that 311 adds as well. But we could use that as a reference, and if they're whatever software or program that they use to manage all this information allows for it, I think that would be a good addition.
So when I come to this committee twice a year, at that given time, you would want to know, or at the time, let's say January or December, you'd want to know at that point how many calls were in the queue as active or closed? Is that what you're hoping for, or are you hoping to see something more
And I kind of
regular?
miss what you, but yeah, I think it's basically like with 311, we get regular reports. So we get, I don't know if it's monthly. Do you know?
Well, we get these things weekly.
weekly.
Is it weekly? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It doesn't need to be that much. But
Right, but,
and
and so
so
when it comes to weekly, it's more meaningful to know that a particular issue is still open. But,
it's
yeah.
up to the committee. I think it would be. I know that information is helpful to know. Like, all right, these are all the complaints. In fact, I started to kind of plan war meetings around what I'm seeing in 311, but also knowing kind of where some of that disposition information as well. So, yeah, just a thought. Nothing I know it'll take time to get there, but I just wanted to put that out there.
I think we're mostly interested in whether the caller, whether feels satisfied with the response that they got. I would
And I
assume,
think that'll be covered in the survey.
Right,
For
yeah.
sure, but I think just knowing on an ongoing basis, like even right now, it'd be nice to know, like, how many calls are open right now that we're working on? How many have we closed between periods? You know, that would be good to know. And yeah, if I think anything else, we could talk more about it offline, Marion, but I just wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
okay.
Yeah, and this is a good discussion because this makes me think of my usual job doing IT work, and when you think about, this is like ticketing, right? And so another piece we might want to extract from this data would be finding out time to resolution. You know, and we could probably see trends I could imagine a lot of these take a long time to, you know, resolve. But it would be good to know just kind of, you know, all these data points, I think, help us make decisions and see like where like the pain points for people are.
Yeah, and we talked about time to resolution as part of the initial conversation. We went with first contact because there was an initial question around, is the service getting back to in touch with people in a timely manner? Time to resolution can be a little bit tricky because it depends on many factors, but I'm happy to look into it and see what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know like in personal experience when referring folks, you know, a lot of times the initial contact to get that advice is like the most important piece in the, you know, in resolving their problem. But yeah, I mean, we're going to have some outliers because a lot of these problems are going to be a lot, you know, you can see like a long time to resolution. I could see a lot of them being just like open for a long period of time, but any more data points we can get would be helpful.
This is a data-hungry group. Chloe?
Well, speaking of which, thanks, this looks great, and thanks for changing the way that you presented, or I guess they presented the number of calls versus the types of complaints since before they were collapsed. So I was wondering with the survey whether they were planning on collecting demographic information. It might be interesting to see sort of who's overrepresented in the complaints, and also it might give some indication of which populations are getting sort of, might be advertised to or getting sort of reached about the existence of the service. So, you know, there are a lot of students here. Are they well represented among the sort of groups or not? Obviously, racial demographic information might be useful. And then this came up, I think, in July. I think that's when we discussed this last. But one of the questions that had come up was whether there are, or there's a way of figuring out if there are sort of repeat offenders in terms of landlords or buildings or management companies or what have you. So I don't know how that was resolved or if it can be without creating other challenges, but I was just curious if that had ended up being discussed.
I will need to go back to see what we can do around that specific part and get back to the committee on that. We don't usually advertise the address, so we may be able to gather the information, but wouldn't publish it or provide it because we don't want to deter residents in contacting the service. As far as the demographics, I can ask them. I think if we decide to suggest that, I'm going to suggest that if they have the ability to do so, that would be a optional second step because there's a high risk of people not being willing to answer the survey altogether when we ask too many questions or very specific question. But best practice usually around those surveys is to ask, are you willing to answer a few additional questions, and then they can do so or not. So I'll see if they have that capability and we can work with them on that.
Okay, Councilmember Heracardis?
One last thought. It would also be good to know how many people call that need language services and how we're
I
providing
need what,
that.
sorry?
How many people call that need language services, translation or interpretation?
good point.
Yeah, and I know they have multilingual staff. I can ask about that too.
Great. Okay, lots of questions. So is that, any more questions or comments from the committee?
Before we quickly move to the next update from Director Flex, I just wanted to provide a quick budget update to the committee. Congress recently adopted the budget for HUD, which means they adopted the budget for our federal grants for 2024. If you remember, you already voted on the action plan by estimate. Yeah, action plan by estimate. So it is looking like CDBG would stay flat, but home may see a decrease. Now, this is all done by formula, so we'll only know for sure by the time the calculation of formulas and our actual grants are finalized and shared with us by HUD. I don't expect this to be before the next 60 days, but I just wanted to give that as an update to the committee. There was discussion that it could have been much worse, so this is not great news, but it is better than some of the conversation that had been happening in Congress.
Great, thank you. So let's move on now to our discussion about what's happening on Wesley Avenue. And Sarah is ready to, do you want to start us off, Sarah, with the information you've pulled together?
Thank you, Councilmember Ravel. I think one of the things that I was asked to have prepared was just really what happened, because there's a great deal of lack of accurate information on what happened. So I'm actually going to kind of start out from the property, just of the property, and then how it could have, under what circumstances it got to the condition that it's in. So this isn't what the city's involvement is directly. It's just how did the building get to where it is. Okay, Evanston Housing Coalition actually acquired these buildings back in 1989. They were actually acquired and rehabbed in part with LIHTC, so that was pretty early for LIHTC. Their affordability for LIHTC, it was interesting because it was like a short one. It wasn't the 30 year, it was apparently just the 15. Their restrictions had burned off in 2026. In 2006, excuse me. Also at that time, they needed to make some repairs. So they came to the city, and the city allocated $180,000 of home. That sounds like a lot, but when you do it over 24 units, that's like $7,500 per unit. So that gives you a 5-year affordability. The money was spent on exterior repairs, primarily the stairs and the platforms. Also some roofing. So
what year was that, Sarah?
that was in 2006 that the money was actually allocated, that the property was actually, the work was finished a little later than that, obviously. But, so, it was under home inspection requirements, and home gets things inspected a lot. It's actually by the number of units in the property, but there were multiple inspections just during that 5-year period. The last one, which was the end of the affordability period and the post, like, is it still fine, was done on August 11th, 2015. At that point, 20 of the 24 units, 17 had a single violation.
Sarah, just point of information, are you sure it's not May 2015? Because I thought it was that they were cured in August of 2015.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
It was May. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing. It was, the inspection was in May. Anyway, not all units had any violations at all. 17 had one, and one had 2 violations. None of these were life safety. Correction of all violations were documented in the reinspection that was done on 8/11/2015. So this means that those buildings were in good condition. The next inspection was set for 5 years. COVID hit. Guess what? There were no inspections during COVID. During the COVID pandemic, all routine interior inspections were halted because of the danger of communicable diseases. We began reinstating routine inspections and in 2022, and a routine inspection was actually scheduled for October, but that one ended up being canceled because by that time we'd actually already started discovering the condition of the buildings. So when you think about it, you have a period from 2015 to 2022. These particular buildings have those external metal staircases. It's really not a good style of housing for our winters. So the problem, obviously, occurred during that period of time. And in 2022, the Evanston Housing Coalition actually got in touch with the city because they were concerned about the condition of the stairways, and they also could not continue to manage the buildings due to the health of their primary staff person. So, Evanston Housing Coalition has a management contract to take over the management of the properties with HODC. And that was the decision of the Evanston Housing Coalition based on who they knew and were familiar with and who they trusted to take over the buildings. So Evanston Housing Coalition knew there were problems, couldn't handle it, came to the city, got HODC involved. HODC did some structural assessments. In fact, they had a structural assessment done in October of 2022. That assessment said the condition of the stairs and platforms was poor, and they recommended that they be removed and replaced. In other words, these were not repairable at this point. They also recommended immediate shoring at the west end of 2024 Wesley Building, and then that put the building on a watch list. HODC and city staff inspected regularly. HODC was also looking at ways to get funding to do repairs or whatever. Bottom line, we kept meeting. Councilmember Burns was in these weekly meetings, and the conditions continued to be monitored. On February 2nd of 2024 was when we had the conditions were deteriorating more rapidly. The problem with these buildings is those stairs and platforms are the only ways to get in and out of the units. So when they start, we had everything had been shored up by then. That was done in late 2022, and more shoring was put in 2023. But the shoring isn't a solution, it's a short-term fix. So our staff, looking at the condition and with the structural information they had, said, it's time we actually have to act. And that was working with Councilmember Burns and staff and nonprofit partners. We had a meeting with the tenants. Not all of them came, but most of them did. I think it was like 12 or 13 out of the total, which was 17 at the time. So that meeting was on February 13th. And at that point, the city brought staff and people to help, and they started getting intake forms, that sort of stuff, worked out with the tenants, so started working on trying to figure out how to help them. Now, this whole effort was not normally the action that a city would take because the situation was very different. The owner of the building came to us because they knew they couldn't handle the situation. Technically, Evanston Housing Coalition is responsible for the structural integrity of the building and also for the well-being of their tenants, but they needed help. So that's how the city got involved when the city got involved. Normally, if you have a dangerous building, there is a process that a municipality can take action under Title I, Chapter 12, Section 6 of City Ordinances, and that is to declare the building unsafe and require that it be vacated. Now, if that action is taken, and it was not, remember, this was a discussion with the tenants to try to get them to voluntarily move out for their own safety and well-being, because we cannot ensure their safety with the ongoing deterioration of these stairs and platforms. So if we had followed the legal process, there would have been a posting. There would have been an official letter sent to the owner of the building. There would be a physical posting on the properties. So the tenants could have walked out in the morning and seen oh my gosh, my building is unsafe and I am being told I have to move by a certain time. That would have been what would have happened if the city had followed the normal legal process for this. That is not a way to help tenants. It is not a way to protect vulnerable people. So that was not done. That's why the meeting took place. Has it solved all the problems at this point? And we have not taken that action yet. And we actually have a meeting scheduled with the tenants tomorrow. And if we can get them to voluntarily move, we will not do the formal notice. That notice is directed at the owner, by the way. The legal requirements is that we notify the owner, and it is the owner's responsibility to deal with the needs of the tenants. So the city got involved in a very different way, specifically to try to support and protect the tenants. And I think that's been misunderstood, and I think that's one of the things that Councilmember Burns is saying. Now, the tenants are in a terrible situation, and I am not at all surprised that they feel that they are being kicked out of their homes. That is how I think any one of us would feel if we were in that situation. But that isn't what is actually being done. And what we are going to be taking to the tenants tomorrow is a more specific list of the benefits and both the help they can get from our staff and also our nonprofits partners. Connections is one of them. Council for Jewish Elderly is helping, is another one. But so anyway, we're going to meet with them again and hopefully make more progress. We are telling them that they will have a rent subsidy for a 12-month rent subsidy. And we have to base it, this is part of what was discussed when we were talking about the participatory budgeting rent assistance. It has to be based on the rents and rent reasonableness that pretty much any funding program does, but that we will help them get apartments. We're going to help them find apartments. We're going to help them get into apartments with paying first month's rent, security deposit, and then a rent subsidy. It can be extended beyond a single year if needed. We haven't really analyzed all the needs of the tenants at this time. But in addition, remember that Connections for the Homeless handles many of our different types of rent subsidies. They're doing our participatory budgeting rent subsidy. They handle our TBRA rent subsidy. They handle our ESG. And they also have other resources. And one of the benefits of that is they also will start looking for other types of housing if the tenants need them. Some tenants are going to need a permanent subsidy. They may need permanent supportive housing. They may need help getting on the lists for the senior buildings until those units open up. There are any number of options that may be appropriate for different tenants. And that's what has to be figured out and done to help them. So I don't think it is reasonable to say the city is not providing support. I do not find it at all unreasonable that the tenants are still incredibly upset. I can't imagine how I would feel if I were in that situation. So I can give you more details on things that probably you don't need, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
So Councilmember Burns has his light on.
Yeah, I just want to start off by, correcting something I said. I did say that Committee Member Ugo had already started to go down that path of spreading misinformation, and Director Flax just mentioned it by saying that we're not doing anything, which is so far from the truth. Not just what you've seen evidenced here. We just released a new FAQ document on the website to try to, have a central place where all this information can live. I've talked to Committee Member Ugo for at least 20 minutes, and as I do, going A to Z based on the information I had available at that time. So the fact that he would come here and say, and lead off by saying we're not doing anything is incredibly insulting, and I just can't emphasize that enough. I apologize for my behavior, but we've been dealing with so much misinformation around this issue, and I promise you, if it continues, it will make the delivery of the supports that we're trying to provide harder to provide for these residents. And so I can no longer allow it. I'm not going to sit idly by and allow people to make those type of claims. I have no issue with people having questions. Ask as many questions as you want. I have no issue with people investigating this matter. I used to be on the board of Open Communities. I talked to Dominic. I've talked to Cheryl. I've talked to Sebastian at CABG. I encourage them to investigate this matter. And if you find something, expose it, right? But what I cannot allow to continue is without any evidence at all, right, and without any provocation, right? Every time we speak to you, we're telling you exactly what we're doing to be accused of not doing anything. It is incredibly insulting, and it is unbecoming of any committee member of any committee, because I've, addressed this with people on different committees. So I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but it's unbecoming of a committee member with the access of knowledge that we have access to make statements like that. And then I just want to say again, as Director Flax said, I have not once said anything about the residents or tenants, because I understand what they're going through. This is one of the most difficult, if not maybe for some, the most difficult thing that they have ever gone through. But although it has even been reported as though, like, residents, I think one of the terms that was used was like they scattered or they had to leave all of a sudden. Only one person has moved so far. That's how far off that is from reality. And I really do encourage our media, we have one in attendance now, to please take another look at your stories that you wrote. And I know it's a tough job being a journalist. I'm not knocking you at all. I'm just saying please, because I said this to our police department too sometimes, is that we're very quick to put people in crisis mode, but then we very rarely come back and, like, you know what, we got a few things wrong. The city is providing more information now. We want to put that out. Please carefully go through the FAQ website. Please take time to listen back to what Director Flax has said, and please write another story, with the information, because now we have new information about inspection reports and other things. We have, again, the residents have not been, forcefully displaced, so much so, I just want to touch on this point again, that only one person to date has left. We are taking our time to make sure that the one thing that I would just slightly disagree with what Director Flax said is we have done needs assessments. We have our victim services, victim advocates, as well as our youth and family services, and another health department outreach worker working closely with the residents. So we do understand what their needs are. We know what their income levels are. We are working with them to understand what their needs are and to meet them. And although only one person has left, some people have already started to explore options at different affordable housing providers. Brenshaw, which is a development right across the street from Fleetwood, I reached out to Deborah Starkovich, and she's been really helpful, her and her staff, in trying to accommodate a speedy kind of application process. So we're working incredibly hard on this. And so, again, I apologize for my behavior earlier, but I just cannot allow. Staff is working so hard on this. We're working so hard on this. These organizations are. Again, I've been in touch with Sebastian and Cheryl Lawrence from Open Communities. Please do not insult the work that we are doing. If you do it, I promise you it will put lives at risk. But if you have questions, ask them. You don't have to attack and criticize to ask questions, right? Just ask questions, get more information. I promise you, you don't know as much as you think you know. and we can provide you with answers. And that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Great, okay. Ugo, your turn.
Thank you. If I could then start with a question for Director Flex. I understand that an email was sent out to landlords that potentially could have units available for these residents. Have you gotten any responses?
I am not the person who's receiving those. We have gotten some responses. I don't know how many. We have actually sent out 2. We started out by reaching out to the landlords in the 5th Ward because the residents of these buildings, many of them have been there for many, many years, and it is their home community. So our first attempt was to reach out to local landlords, very local landlords, to try to give them the opportunity to stay as close to where they are now as possible. We then have also contacted all of the Evanston landlords. Those calls and contacts are going straight to the social services providers, so I don't know how many have responded. But we have gotten some response, and as Councilmember Burns said, some specific ones are in contact with him and other people directly. But it really is something where our staff and Connection staff and other people's staff, other social services staff, are really working to help the tenants. It's very difficult, as everybody knows, to find housing in Evanston right now.
Right. And I'm glad that the city is being proactive in that sense, that they're trying to reach out to landlords to find available units for these residents. I believe that, and I've been told, that the residents, and I think I saw it in writing somewhere, I don't have it with me, but I saw it in writing, that the residents were asked to leave the building because it's unsafe, that the city was going to provide with hotel for 7 days, extendable as needed, and all of that stuff, but they'll be looking out on their own for their apartments. And let's not forget, I can provide documentation to that next meeting, so we'll have it. Let me finish, please. I didn't interrupt you, so please let me finish.
I told you I was going to be disruptive. You just spread misinformation.
It doesn't matter. I am not.
Go ahead.
I am not. They were asked to go out and look for their next residence. It is not easy. These people have subsidies for their rents. These people are elder. So it's not an easy task. We're asking them to move. And my point on this is that I think that the city or the management company or the ownership of the building should come up and say, okay, we're going to find the apartments for you so you can move into a permanent housing that it's in Evanston, and preferably in the 5th Ward. That's what I think that the city should be doing at this point, either through the city, and I know that there are restrictions in resources with staff, but then the ownership or the management of those buildings. So I think that that's what the city should be doing for these folks. Everything else that's in writing and demands from the residents or from the city or whatever, I think it's irrelevant at this point. It's either we are displacing people from their residence and not to their fault. So that's what I think is relevant to this
Yeah,
committee.
so Sarah, can you, do we have staff who are trying to help find?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought you
The
said.
first bullet point on the resources is housing search assistance.
And that's the first thing that
bullet
went out
point?
to tenants. That was the first information, that was in the first document that went out that we provided to tenants. Sorry, Marion, go ahead if you want to.
The letter that I think is what you are referring to, Hugo, was the one from February 13th, which was not mailed, it was hand-delivered. It did tell them that the city was requiring them to vacate, but it did not, it says that the city's priority is your safety. Leading up to this notice, the city has engaged the property owner, community leaders, and housing advocates to address the property's conditions and identify options to ensure tenant safety. At this point, the city believes it's important to directly engage tenants to discuss options for relocation. Throughout the week, city staff and housing partners will meet with you to discuss relocation, including options for temporary housing and assistance for moving and storing your belongings. Staff members coordinating assistance gave the names of and contact information of 2 staff members. If you have friends or family that may be able to assist in this transition, city staff and housing partners would like to include them in these discussions. The city understands that each tenant's circumstances are different, and staff will help to identify the best option for you and your family. So this is not saying they're not getting any help. That's saying we're going to help you.
It's the exact opposite, Director Flack. That's what makes all this so just, it's almost not even worth responding to. It's literally the exact opposite of what you're saying.
I'm not saying the opposite to that. I'm
Well,
absolutely not.
One of the bullet point, the first, I mean, if you can provide it, you can provide, but one of we didn't mail the letter. The letter was provided at a meeting that we organized because we didn't want to just mail a letter to someone. And as Director Flack said, one of the first bullet points talked about apartment search. It's exactly the opposite of what you're saying, and it's been that way from the beginning.
How is it the opposite of what I'm saying?
You're saying that we told residents that they were going to have to search for their own apartments. We told them the exact opposite.
It's on the report of,
What report are you
of
talking
the
about?
city manager. He made a report to city council on February 20th where it says that. He said it. He said it. I have a copy of that. Just didn't bring it. I brought the wrong
I don't know
file.
what you're talking. All I can say is in the information that we provided tenants at the first meeting, which is when they found out about
The city will
this.
be paying for 7 days of hotel, extendable as needed. That is correct. But they were to go out and look for the next residence.
Right, and that was not communicated. What was communicated in plain language and in writing was that the city would provide assistance with apartment searching. That was provided to the tenants in writing when they found out about this at Fleetwood Jourdain in the art room on the southeast side of the building by me.
I have the letter.
I'm telling you
Also,
what
yeah.
the tenants were, whatever letter you have, okay, you can provide that. I'm telling you what was provided to the residents in writing. And so as you look for different things to pick at, Committee Member Ugo, it's okay to say, you know what, it sounds like y'all are doing a good job, and keep it up and let me know I can help. Because I see what you're just trying to find something.
No.
You're not going to find anything. We have been on top of this from the very beginning. Have you not listened to Director Flax? We have been working on this. We didn't start working on this when we gave them the letter. We've been meeting on a regular basis, monitoring these buildings, keeping an eye on it, in constant communication with the owner, with the property manager that was retained by the owner. We've been on top of this from the beginning. We've been very careful about making sure that we're supporting the residents however they need. And we've told them, look, if we've missed anything, let us know, which is what is informing the information we're going to provide at the next meeting. It's okay to say good job. It's okay. Ugo,
It
I
hasn't
promise
been.
it's
You
okay.
tell me how many apartments you have ready for these residents, then I'll start saying, good job. But
Whoa, what
but
are you
there
talking
there
about?
is no apartment ready
We sit up
for
here,
any of
we sit up
this.
here all the time, and we talk about how there's a affordable housing shortage.
Correct.
That's what we're working on.
Correct. And now we're eliminating 24 units of affordable housing.
What are you talking about eliminating?
What's going to happen with the buildings?
Can you answer that
That
question,
has not
Director
been
Flack? We've already
determined yet.
answered that question, yeah.
That has not been determined yet.
You know, I am
But
not
we know
an
we're going to
expert,
develop.
But I have
If somebody's
seen,
going to develop, and it's going to be affordable housing, we know it's going to happen because the affordable housing currently owns the land. The only time it flips to condos or market rate rents is when a private developer owns the land. That's not what's happening. There's two non-for-profits involved in the city. It's going to be affordable housing. You know what the difference is going to be?
But a
It's-
non-for-profit owns it now.
It's
And
going to
look
be
where
it's
they
going to be a
are.
higher standard of living for the residents. The
Look
electrical
where
is
they
bad.
are today. A non-for-profit owns the buildings today, and look where they are. We have to push out the residents of those buildings that are owned by a non-for-profit today. So it doesn't mean that another non-for-profit is going to do a good job. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. That I don't know. But the fact that it's a non-for-profit owning those units today, that is a big problem. And the problem is part of the city of Evanston because we are not being good stewards of what the city should be doing, which is keep an eye on these buildings, especially if they're getting subsidy, especially if there are elder people living there that we
Ugo.
know of.
Director Flash just described our routine inspections. We keep an eye on the building in two ways primarily: routine inspections and complaint-driven inspections. She provided you the dates for routine inspections. Hold on, please.
2015 was the last one.
We do routine inspections on a 5-year schedule. So we did it in 2015, then COVID hit, if you were listening. And then in 2022, when we were rescheduling the routine inspections, the owner had already reached out.
It's also okay to say we goofed on this one.
You're not providing any evidence. Everything you're saying is not true, Ugo.
We have not keep an eye on these buildings.
What do you mean by that?
2015 was the last inspection made to those properties.
Ugo, the schedule is on a 5-year schedule. That's what most cities do, right? You don't want to, this is a very comprehensive inspection we're talking about. It's on a 5-year schedule, and most cities do that. So we did it in 2015. We were going to do it again in 2020, and then COVID hit. And then we started to reschedule for all of these routine inspections across the city, but this particular landlord had already reached out. You have not said one thing which is true yet.
What is it that I'm saying that it's a lie?
You can act as shocked as you
You
want.
tell
I
me
promise
what is
you
it that
I
is a
promise
lie.
you that this committee, and Chair, please cut us off whenever you want, because it's starting to get ridiculous, and I even understand that.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you
You're
that
telling
there's
me that
no
I'm
committee member.
misinforming
There's
and
no
that I'm saying
there's no
lies.
committee
You
member
tell
here.
me one.
I just did.
No,
What do
you haven't.
Okay.
You're just saying that I'm misinforming and lying.
I have
not.
I have clarified.
said a lie.
Yes, you have. You're spreading misinformation. I have clarified every single misinformation that you provided, and Director Flax has as well. And I promise you, this whole committee recognizes as well as our folks looking out. I don't know what your agenda is, and
I
why
have
you,
no agenda.
I don't know
I'm
why.
not a politician.
I don't know.
I'm a
I don't know
community
why. I
member
don't know
here.
why you're dead set on
Yeah,
trying to find
okay,
something
okay,
here.
gentlemen.
But there's nothing here. And if you find it, bring up something real. You have not done that today.
Right,
And sorry,
okay.
Chair.
Yeah, okay. Chloe?
Thank you. Thank you for your work. I guess I have a few questions that are related to this, but sort of, I guess, bigger picture. And so one, has anything Has anything like this happened before, first of all, in terms of tenants needing to, or sort of, finding themselves in the situation where they, the building is deemed unsafe, and sort of, sort of a nonprofit in Evanston has, I guess I'm curious as to whether this is unprecedented and whether we might be concerned about, since there are all of these deferred investigations or inspections, whether we need to be concerned about it in the future.
I don't think,
That's
this
just
is an
informational
anomaly.
question.
I don't
That's my
think this is at all common.
Okay.
And quite frankly, our nonprofit housing providers are generally the ones that are doing much better at keeping their properties up. This is a really unfortunate situation. I mean, I can't tell you what's going to happen, how quickly metal like this is going to deteriorate and corrode, but the structural engineer commented that one of the problems with when you have this kind of corrosion is that freezing, thawing, those cycles make it worse. And let's face it, look at what our winters are like now. We get one day where it's below freezing, and then the next day it's 60 degrees. I mean, we have some real extremes. I do want to point out one thing, though. Heartland Alliance, one of the largest nonprofit providers of affordable housing in the city of Chicago, is closing its housing program and selling its portfolio. And one of the reasons is they are no longer able to maintain them. COVID hit nonprofits every bit as hard as it hit regular housing providers. And one of the things that, nobody was evicted during COVID. If people weren't paying rent, they wouldn't be evicted. And even if they had cause for eviction, the sheriff was not evicting anyone. And that led to some other places where we had people who were not evicted in a timely manner. So, I don't think that this is going to be a pattern at all.
I would say Howard Street. I don't think it was owned by a not-for-profit, but there.
No.
Yeah.
We did have we had to get people out of a building on Howard Street. That was a very different situation. They had to be removed much faster because they had a failed roof, and the ceilings and the walls were literally collapsing. And that was a case where we did not have a cooperative owner, where we did post, and those tenants were generally, they hadn't been living there as long, they were younger, they had more ability to find housing, I guess, but they had to be moved out,
Thanks.
and that was in 2022.
Yeah, that's helpful to know, although the sort of point about the nonprofits in general, I mean, everyone's sort of struggling with deferred sort of maintenance. That's a little bit concerning, I suppose. Do we know if there are other California-style buildings in Evanston that might be facing a similar, especially if that stock was built at a certain point, you know,
About
if it was-
1960, not
Yeah,
our best
so-
construction
but
years.
Yeah, it's not, it isn't. It's true.
Really
But
not our
also,
best
you know, if
construction
that's
years.
mostly 60s stock, then it could all be reaching the end of its lifespan at roughly the same time. And so do we have a sense of whether there are other buildings that might be facing that kind of circumstance?
We don't
as
have
well?
an
I know the
inventory of it,
specifics
unfortunately. I don't know of any of our other nonprofits that have buildings exactly like this. And there are, I'm sure, some in
There
the
are some,
city.
yeah, there's some on, there's one on
Councilmember Burns
Wesley, one
knows
on
about some.
Jackson. But, you know, again, and we've tried hard not to point fingers here, and I won't do it today, but, I mean, what I will say is, I think those properties are being maintained, you know, and, you know, these were not during that period, which is why we're getting involved. So I'll kind of leave it at that. But
Yeah, that's
there are
helpful.
similar, there are California walk-up style buildings very close to actually to this one again, one on Wesley, which is a same street, but on the south of Foster. And then there's one on Jackson. It's funny because they're all in this tight area, and then there's also one on Darrow, on the turnaround end of Darrow, just off of Simpson.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm asking mostly
It's a good
sort of the
question.
evidence
Sure,
that,
sure.
There's so much evidence that the city is on it and trying to respond. But we were expecting a very quiet meeting last month. And so it was surprising to see, you know, a dozen or more people here. And there does seem to have been a breakdown between how tenants experienced this and sort of the processes that had to be followed and that were followed and the response. And so to the extent that this might be an issue that could occur again, I guess I would just wonder if there are better ways to communicate, or I guess I'm wondering if there are things that could be changed in terms of communication strategy in the future.
Personally, this is going to sound odd, but I almost think as long as the residents are okay with this, recording meetings. And it may sound off, but I promise you, much of what we're dealing with is we say one thing, and then either the residents may hear a slightly different thing, or even worse, people who weren't even in the meeting kind of instigate the situation. And again, it may seem like I can't think of the word right now, but kind of diverting your question. But I'm really not. At the meeting that we had with them, the tone was incredibly different than what y'all experienced up here, and that's because it was pre-instigators, pre-regular disruptors, all of the Evanston thing that can happen where people kind of leech onto these situations and try to exploit them. Very different meeting. No one raised their voices. No one was shouting. We answered. They had questions, of course. They wanted to know how we would help, and we explained that, but in a completely different tone. And so we have to realize that these issues are not happening in a vacuum. They're happening in a city that can be very polarized at times and kind of very politically active.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to preemptively, and perhaps having a
The only thing
recording
that I
is a
did
way
say
to do
this
that.
to Sergio and Cheryl, the only thing that, because at this meeting, we had everybody there. We had, District 265 through Ali Harnett was there because we knew they were school-aged children. We had Health Department, Community Development Department. I've already went through this before. The one folks that I wish we would have invited, and it was just an oversight, we weren't trying to ignore them, is like the Open Communities, the fair housing organization, so that even though you got to stand for me, I feel like I was on the board of Open Communities, I fight really hard for affordable housing. I'm like, yeah, we're going to take care of y'all, like whatever you need. But a lot of this is like, it might be perception. There might be a lack of trust in the city, not for anything I've done or Director Flax has done, but because some history that individual has with the city. And so in retrospect, that's the one voice that I think would have been helpful to have in the room, just so they could feel comfortable knowing that there are, fair housing organizations and people that, work with residents to protect their rights, participating in the meeting. But I have been in touch with Cheryl Lawrence, as I said, from Open Communities, Sebastian. As we've tried to explain, people have said, oh, you violated. We haven't done anything because we haven't even officially started the process because we wanted to give like super advance notice so that we would have time to work with residents. And so there's nothing that's been violated. Honestly, from what our legal team is telling, our lawyers are telling us is the protections are, the due process is really for the landlord, right? And not necessarily for the residents, which some community members have, as far as our legal help is telling us, kind of inaccurately suggested. It's really the landlord that is due the 15-day notice to make the repairs, and if not, then we can take a course of action. But obviously, we're not, as a city, limited to that. We can, we can provide, decide when we want to notice and provide the support that we feel is necessary.
Okay. I'll just jump in. I think that's an interesting suggestion from Councilmember Burns, that when there's going to be a meeting with such heightened emotions, to have taped it so people could listen to it afterwards. And then also, because the news was so traumatic for people, it's really easy as they try to replay in their mind what was said. It's, I think, probably really easy to get it all mixed up. So, yeah, right. Ugo.
Yeah, I have a question in regards to what Bobby is mentioning about, the procedure, the legal procedure is against the landlord. So has any of that been followed by the city against the ownership of the?
Not at this time. Not at this time.
So it's a choice of the city to follow the procedure or not to follow the procedure?
We've chosen to work with the tenants to try to get them to move out on what we would call a voluntary basis. So, and not just go through this posting and then we have to put a specific date by which they have to move out.
But the posting would be for the tenants, not for the landlord. And my question is to the landlord.
The posting is a 15-day notice to the landlord.
Okay.
The posting is to the landlord. The landlord then has that time to cure. If the landlord does not cure in that period of time, then the city can step in and take action. Could move everybody out and demolish the property if that were what seemed to be the best thing. But that does not seem to be a good way to approach vulnerable tenants.
And what are the consequences to that landlord if they don't comply with the 15-day to remedy?
Then the city
posting?
can take action to address the situation itself, which means we get the authority to be able to step in, take over the property, either make the repairs, which isn't feasible. You can't make the repairs. Even if we could make the repairs, we couldn't do it with the tenants in the building, which other people have asked about. Well, why can't the tenants stay there? What are we going to do? Airlift them in and out by helicopter? That is not a safe thing, especially for these buildings are all walk-ups, and at least 9 of the households have seniors. These buildings are not ideal for those residents. They certainly aren't ideal now, but the city can then step in and they can actually require, through force if necessary, people to remove them. We don't want to have to do that. That's going to traumatize people even more.
it's the
Did
city
you hear about the
planning.
Harvey building? Same type. It was shut down by Harvey. They noticed the landlord or the property owner. The property owner apparently didn't do much because other than get the board up company to come in, and they started boarding up while people were still in the building. I do not want to have anything happen like that on any situation that I have any control over.
So is the city planning to take over the property?
We haven't determined that, Ugo. We've already said that.
Yeah, there's plenty to do, just focusing on helping the tenants get resettled. So.
So
Ugo,
there is really no consequences of letting this building get to this point to the owner of the property at this point. The city hasn't determined if there'll be consequences or not to this owner.
I don't even think the residents, frankly, would want that. I've said this before, but I haven't heard a single resident say anything negative about the landlord. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They feel like the landlord and the organization had their back all these years, and I don't even think they would want that. I'll let Director Flax kind of respond.
So would the residents be the determining factor to enforce consequences to an owner? Because
Ugo, what are you looking for?
no, I'm just looking for an answer to those questions.
We have
And
not
if-
determined what's going to happen to the properties yet.
And also,
Could
the
we
consequences,
take-
penalties, we can go
Right.
through that. Like,
Yeah.
the consequences in any other situations, like, it's penalties until you make the correction.
Yeah.
And we've
Normally,
been
what
working
you
with
do,
with the
if
landlord.
you have a non-voluntary situation, you do something to fix or address the situation. That gives you a lien. Then you can pursue the lien and get control of the property.
Yeah, but there are so many questions here, Sarah, that are not answered. And one of the questions is, the ownership is a non-for-profit.
Correct.
So to say that there is one individual owner, if it's a non-for-profit, it must have a board of directors.
Yes, there is. We
and
didn't say
it
there
must
was one
have,
owner.
An executive director or something, somebody who is responsible besides the owner. So this is a
It
401.
is owned by a nonprofit. It
Yeah.
has a board. It has an executive director.
So are we bringing the board to responsibility to
I think
take
we'll go-
They
some?
are in discussion with us. They are
Yeah.
cooperating with us at this
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
I think the focus should be on what the city's doing to make sure the tenants get
Housing.
settled in new
And safe.
appropriate housing, and, any kind of, well, the decision about what to do about the buildings ultimately will have to be figured out, but it's taking everybody's resources right now to work, to help the tenants.
No, and
So
I don't
Joanne-
disagree with that.
Joanne's had her light on. Yeah.
Only person who has experienced this type of thing when my condo building in 808 Judson burned down in 96, and I lost everything I owned, and there were 21 units in there. And so, I had insurance, but we had two people who didn't have insurance, a renter and an owner. But anyway, the building was rebuilt. But, and the city let us have our board meetings every week at the Civic Center here. But, so my concern, does it look like there's a good possibility that most of the tenants will be able to stay in Evanston, because that is probably their preference. Now, Dina Payton said she had several units, I don't know if people have applied for those units or anything.
I don't know about those specific units, but some of the tenants are in the process of applying for units in Evanston, and that's what we're trying to help them do. Our goal, and we told them that, is to keep them not only in Evanston, but in the Fifth Ward as much as possible, if that is what they choose. Can we do it absolutely perfectly? Maybe with cooperation from landlords, we can. But that's being worked on, and it's just a challenge.
And I
this
just
time.
want to also add, without bringing up names, but the person you mentioned is a landlord, from my understanding, that typically likes to work with voucher holders. I believe that initially, this particular landlord believed that everybody or a majority of the residents here have vouchers. They do not. So now, in order for that same individual to help, they're going to have to come back to the same place that they've unfairly criticized in order so we can provide a subsidy to help these residents. And that's what I mean. There's been so much misinformation that it's hard for us to help. We're just trying to help. But you have people like that who we know has told people not to listen to the city. Because, again, initially, I believe this individual thought they were voucher holders. Nope, not voucher holders. And even if they got on the list, how long does it take, Director Flack, sometimes? Years. And then they open it up, every 20 years or something like that? So
About on that.
that individual is going to have to come back to the city now in order to help the residents if they do have units available. And we've reached out to that landlord. I have personally sent that individual's contact information to one of our outreach workers. I don't know what's going on with it, but we are actively reaching out to that landlord, but others too. I mean, as Ugo said, we sent out a email first to every single landlord that's registered in the Fifth Ward, and we have gotten some responses. I was going to say, you got any units?
If,
I'm sorry? Oh, okay. And then the second email was to every landlord that we have registered in the city, and again, we have received some responses. Yeah, I'm confident, again, if we can start to work together, because you got to understand, every time somebody puts something in the residents' ears, it makes it, and then our folks call and say, oh, we got this unit at Brenshaw. This literally just happened, and then they say, oh, well, I don't know. We want to, so they're creating anxiety amongst this group, and it makes it harder for us to help. Brenshaw, for an example, at Emerson Square has available units, and we literally can't get some of the residents to apply because there's, again, so much misinformation. There's so much kind of different things being shared with them that they don't know to turn left or right, which is why I hope after this meeting tomorrow.
I was going to ask,
Yeah,
can
we
you
will.
talk about the meeting that you're having tomorrow? Is that, you're hoping that all the tenants will be there and for updates and?
We certainly hope so. I hand-delivered flyers to each of their apartments on Saturday.
Right, yeah, okay. Well, I think we've probably covered this enough for this evening, and I'm sure Director Flax will be happy to give us an update again next month. A brief update, because it sounds like we have a huge agenda if we're going to be dealing with the RLTO at our next meeting, so. Okay,
All right.
great, okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Be the only item then, next month, just the ordinance?
The RLTO and our legal department is writing a memo
Right.
that will be for discussion about the just cause ordinance and some of the other ancillary items that are associated with that.
But you had said that the original agenda was going to be light, so those issues are going to be put off.
The other
Yes,
issues are going to be put off if there weren't any really substantive ones, right?
no, based on our schedule and everything that pushed up or forward, the only item that we had was the one-stop shop scheduled update. You got an update in February due to status of the program. We felt it was premature to do a program update in April, and we'll be doing something a couple months further so that you get a much more substantive update around the program and where they're at, really. So that leaves the full April 16th committee to be able to be dedicated to this topic.
Right, Ugo.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if we could possibly get earlier than the Friday before the meeting, what the draft is that staff has on the RLTO, and also what is it that the legal department determinations have been in regards to this ordinance, so we can come prepare for that meeting.
Yes, that is absolutely something we are planning on doing. We hope to have it out a week in advance.
Okay, thank you.
Great, okay. So I think we are at the end of our agenda. Thank you all very much, and we will rest up for a big discussion next month. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.